Top 15 fantasy trilogies I have read. I just noticed today that I have now officially read 20 completed fantasy trilogies. And today I thought it'd be fun to rank the best trilogies I read from spot 15 all the way to number 1. Now before we start, everyone expects The Lord of the Rings to be at the first place, and I just find it so predictable. Yes, I love The Lord of the Rings, it's one of the greatest trilogies of all time, and also just to make things a bit more exciting so you don't know exactly what is going to be on number 1, I'll just add it to number 0, and I won't mention Lord of the Rings again, but obviously if you haven't read Lord of the Rings yet, you should definitely read it. So without further ado, let's get into it. And one last thing, for a trilogy to be on this list, I have had to have read all 3 books. Obviously, I read the first and second books of a lot of trilogies. So if you're wondering why a trilogy might not be on this list that you love, I might just have read the first book and I'm still reading that trilogy. And obviously, for me to actually have read all 3 books in a trilogy means that I have loved that trilogy. So even the trilogy on spot number 15 is a favorite of mine because I wouldn't have read all the way to the end if I didn't enjoy it. Okay, without further ado, let's get into it. On spot number 15, we have a trilogy I finished last month. And that is going to be the first arc or trilogy in the Echo Saga by Philip C. Quaintrell. If you're looking for a John Gwynne or Ryan Cahill kind of trilogy that feels very, very classic, but also feels modern when it comes to its pacing, maybe not as heavy on descriptions as like Tolkien, then I would highly recommend this one. I mean, it has elves, it has dwarves, it has huge dragons, it feels very, very classic, but it has all those tropes that we come to love in fantasy, especially if you enjoy medieval classic fantasy. And overall, it's just really well executed. I would say that the first book in this trilogy, Rise of the Ranger, is not a bad book, but it's quite dense. I mean, I think there's like 7 or 8 POVs, but if you can get through this book and get to book number 2, Empire of Dirt, which is my favorite in the trilogy, then I think you will have a great time. On spot number 14 is a trilogy I finished around a year ago, and that's going to be the Tonyman trilogy by Robin Hobb, which is the 3rd series set in the realm of the Elderlings. Now, I had a wonderful time with this one, especially Fool's Errand, which is book 1 in the Tonyman trilogy. I thought was one of the best Robin Hobb books I've ever read, and I've now read 9, and I'm reading the first book in the Ravenwell Chronicles at the moment. This book is near flawless. It is so good. The only reason why it isn't high on this list is just because of the pacing. The pacing is horrendously slow, especially in book 2. This is probably the first time there is a proper middle book syndrome in my opinion, because in book 2, towards the end, some important things happen. But the first like 400 pages, I mean, I felt like nothing happened. But it is fits, and it's beautiful written, and it's Robin Hobb. So even though it was incredibly slow paced, and I'm using slow pace here now for Robin Hobb, who is famous for being slow, I still had a wonderful time with this one, and it's still one of the best trilogies I have read. Remember to read Farseer and Live Ship before you pick up this one. Okay, I'm going to be slightly cheating because I said I had to have read all 3 books, but I'm so close to finishing this trilogy, and that's going to be The Powder Mage. I am reading the 3rd book now, and I'm like halfway through, and I feel like this will be on this list anyways. I'm going to add it because I've had such a wonderful time with book 1 and 2 and half of book 3 that if you're looking for a steampunk kind of fantasy that kind of feels like Age of Madness, but is maybe more fantastical, it's really well paced, and is epic in scope, then I would highly recommend this one. But I think McClellan really does well here is crafting interesting characters and having really satisfying plot twists. And what I find so original here is especially Adamat's POV in the first 2 books. It kind of feels like he's a Sherlock Holmes kind of character, and there's almost like a whodunit plotline, and I just felt that very refreshing to have like a whodunit plotline in a steampunk fantasy where gods are in the background trying to take control. Just really good and really satisfying, and I can't wait to read the very last half of the 3rd book. But yeah, this will definitely have been on this list, so yeah, I'm cheating a tiny bit with this one. On spot number 12, we have the Taichild trilogy. Oh, this way. The Taichild trilogy by R.J. Barker. I actually read this series with my viewers last summer. We read 1 book per month, and this was brilliant. Now, this was very different from anything I've ever read. This is a nautical, like pirate kind of fantasy, but the world building is some of the weirdest and most interesting world building I have ever come across in the whole genre. We have massive sea dragons. Gender roles are kind of swapped. I mean, we have some really brilliant, strong female leads, and R.J. Barker goes crazy with the world building. Like, he invents terms for almost everything. So the first, especially 100 pages of the first books, it is dense. There's so many words you've never heard before. So I think the learning curve here is quite steep because you're just thrown into it. But if you can stick with it, I think you'll find something that you'll never come across in the fantasy genre. And I've actually made a full spoiler-free dedicated review for this trilogy if you want to know more about the world building R.J. Barker has crafted. On spot number 11, we have the Threadlight series by Zach Argyle. isn't it nice once in a while to actually read a fantasy trilogy where every book isn't 1000 pages? Well, you should maybe pick up the Threadlight series if you're looking for a series like that. Every book in this series is like 350 pages, and there's not that much text on each page, so it's a really like fast and riveting read. What I really appreciate about this one is that it has a hard magic system, so if you're a fan of Allomancy from Mistborn, then I think you'll definitely love this one. But what I love here, and you can see it in the cover, we're following a father who has newly gotten a child. We also have the mom who plays quite a big role in this whole trilogy. And it's not that often that we actually see parents, like new parents, being in conflict. So I just thought that was very, very refreshing. And yeah, Zach Argyle, he just does a brilliant job of keeping you on your toes. And I'm quite blown away how intricate the world building is, considering this whole trilogy is like 1100 pages. These covers are also gorgeous. So definitely a high recommend for me. Another thing that helped me relate and love the Threadlight series was the depiction of having to move away from your own country and culture and move to a new place, which is something I can relate to since I moved away from the Faroe Islands to the UK 4 years ago. Now, moving to a new country like I did 4 years ago brings its shares of challenges. I mean, adapting to a new culture, learning a third language, and going back to university were just the beginning for me. Now, during this time, reading became a refuge and a way to understand and process my new experiences. But books alone could not address everything. That's where therapy could have been immensely helpful. And that is why I'm so excited to introduce you to BetterHelp, our paid partners for today's video. Now, BetterHelp offers professional therapy with credentialed therapists who understands the intricacies of challenges like mine and possibly yours. Whether it's adjusting to a new environment, dealing with stress, or just feeling low, they're here to help. You start by visiting betterhelp.com/libraryofaviking, answer a few questions, and BetterHelp matches you with a therapist suited to your specific needs, usually within 48 hours. Now, you can communicate through messages, phone calls, or video chats, making therapy convenient and accessible from everywhere. Therapy helps you understand yourself and develop coping strategies. It provides an objective perspective that I can't get from books or even close friends and family. It's not just about getting advice, it's about learning how to navigate life's challenges with confidence. And BetterHelp can do this for you. If you want to start your journey towards better mental health, visit betterhelp.com/libraryofaviking and get 10% off your first month. Taking the first steps towards better mental health is a sign of strength, not weakness. Now, you remember how I said that R.J. Barker has weird world building? Well, on spot number 10 we have The Winning Flame trilogy by Jen Williams. And if R.J. Barker is weird, then Jen Williams, she definitely rivals him, because the world building here is seriously strange. This trilogy has witches, we have like these alien UFOs scattered across the world, we have this alien humanoid race that drinks blood to stay alive, we have this magical tree that is pairing these humanoid creatures, we have these massive bats that you can ride on and fly. It is seriously strange, but I think that is what is so great with Jen Williams. I've also read Talon Sister recently, and the world building is also weird there. And also, if you enjoy probably the best animal companions you can come across in genre, then this is for you. This is the definition of modern fantasy. It is fresh, it is very weird, and it's very, very unique, but it is just such a wonderful time. I love this trilogy. I think it's very, very underhyped, and more people should pick it up, because yeah, this is not your typical medieval fantasy in any kind of way. On spot number 9, we have the Poppy War trilogy by R.F. Kuang. Now, I read this trilogy around 2 years ago, so I was quite new to fantasy, or relatively new to fantasy, and I remember how refreshing I found this trilogy. This is an Asian-inspired fantasy that follows an underdog, Rin, as she goes to school, and then she just becomes extremely powerful. And while the first half of this book feels quite like a coming-of-age / underdog story in an academy, the rest of the series is seriously grimdark. I mean, there is a chapter in the first book that is just absolutely shocking how gory and detailed everything is that happens. So yeah, it's not for the faint-hearted, so if you don't enjoy like grimdark, stay away from this trilogy. But yeah, R.F. Kuang, she is such a talented author, and I know some people sometimes say that this is actually YA, but I don't know what's wrong with you if you think this is YA. Yes, we're following a young female lead, but except for that, there's nothing YA about this. So please stop calling it YA, because it's definitely not YA. I would never give this to a 16 or 17-year-old. That is just insane. But yeah, very fresh fantasy. It's very dark. It follows an underdog. We have big scheming gods and conflicts that are threatening the whole world. So love this trilogy, and also these covers are beautiful. On spot number 8, this is actually not fantasy, this is sci-fi, but that is Red Rising. Are you surprised? A lot of people say that they feel like I'm a Red Rising hater. I've never said that. I just was very disappointed with the first book. I think I gave it 3 stars. I just didn't really enjoy the Hunger Games kind of conflict that we are introduced to in the first book, but book 2 and 3 were significant step ups in quality and in storytelling, and had so many great character moments. And the weird thing about this trilogy is that the more time that is gone, the more I'm starting to appreciate exactly what Pierce Brown has crafted in this trilogy. Yes, occasionally at times I felt that this could be a tad bit too dramatic, maybe had a bit too many twists and so on, but it's beautifully paced, and the politics is really well done, especially in book 2 and 3. And yeah, I'm definitely hoping to be continuing this series this year. But yeah, when it comes to the Red Rising trilogy, first book, bit of a disappointment, but book 2 and 3 are brilliant. On spot number 7, we have a trilogy I finished last month, and that's going to be Empire of the Wolves trilogy. Now the third book isn't officially out yet, but I got an ARC. Again, I know I keep using the words fresh fantasy, but man, does this feel fresh. The first book is like a legal thriller slash whodunit crime mystery. And then this book also has a lot of like the legal thriller aspects, but then it turns seriously dark and almost like horror-like. And then the third book, which I've just finished, is just straight up medieval horror with demons and stuff. And it is just fascinating. Now, the way the story is told is that this character called Helena, who is actually our protagonist, is telling the story of Vonwald, this legend that travels around in the country trying to solve mysteries and trying to like bring law and order to different parts of the country. And then from there, from a simple murder, things take a dark turn, and slowly we see how Vonwald slowly becomes more and more mad as things just start to unravel. I think Vonwald's character is really well done. I like the framing narrative. I like the commentary on philosophy and law and morality and value of life and so on. And then I also just thought it was so refreshing to have a legal thriller that turns into a medieval fantasy. Now, in my opinion, the third book is the weakest in this trilogy. I think book 1 and 2 are definitely better, but overall this is still a brilliant trilogy, and I've made a full spoiler-free review also for this trilogy on my channel if you're interested. And next up, obviously we had to have the First Law trilogy by Joe Abercrombie. Now this isn't the best work that Joe Abercrombie has written in my opinion. Just wait, I will reveal where Age of Madness is. It's definitely coming up. But if you're looking for grim dark fantasy that is very character focused, I mean, everyone knows Joe Abercrombie is known and is a legend for his characterization, and that is certainly the case. I loved this trilogy. The first book, yes, almost nothing happens. We just follow characters walking around and stuff like that. But the way that Joe Abercrombie is able to make like subtle and small changes to the characters that in the third book really pay off is just astounding. And there are very few authors out there in the genre that are able to just write a line, and just by reading that line, you know who is speaking. Joe Abercrombie is that good when it comes to his characterization. So yeah, this is one of the best grimdark trilogies that are out there for sure. It has had a huge impact on the genre, and it definitely deserves all the love. On 5th spot, we have the Farseer trilogy by Robin Hobb. Oh, I've fallen in love with Robin Hobb. She has my heart. I might call my dog or my daughter Robin. Yeah, I mean, if there are any trilogies that have made me feel emotional, then it certainly is the Farseer trilogy. One of the best character studies in the genre. We follow this bastard called Fitz, who goes through just emotional pain, emotional torture throughout 3 chunky books, and I feel so bad for Fitz, but all the trials and all the confusion he experiences also makes him one of the best characters of all time. I also think the magic system is brilliant. I think the politics is brilliant, but the very best thing about this trilogy, and also the prose, is brilliant, but it's just really the characterization. Yes, Fitz is an amazing character, but it just blows my mind how good the side characters are. This trilogy will pull at your heartstrings, it'll make you cry, it has some incredible animal pet companions. Now, if I need to criticize this trilogy, then I would say that the third book, Assassin's Quest, is too long in my opinion. It is a satisfying conclusion, but it probably could have been shortened by 200-300 pages in my opinion. But yeah, I love Fitz, and I love the fact that we have the Tournament trilogy, and there's even a trilogy afterwards that I haven't read yet. But yeah, If you read the series, then you will come to realize that Fitz is one of the best characters in the fantasy genre, for sure. On spot number 4 is one of the trilogies that got me into fantasy, and it's one of the best-selling trilogies of the past 20 years, and that is Mistborn by Brandon Sanderson. I always recommend this series for people that want to get into fantasy, because this has everything. It kind of feels like a blend of YA and adult fantasy. I truly think that both younger audiences, when I say younger, I mean like teenagers, and adults will fully enjoy this one. And this was my first introduction to a hard magic system, which just blew my mind. It was almost like reading a video game. I really hope to make a video game of this trilogy one day, because literally it feels like you're reading a video game when you are reading this series. I think Sanderson does a phenomenal job with the atmosphere, with the characters, and who doesn't love a plot where we get like a motley crew that is trying to pull off this impossible heist. Now, what really surprised me with this book is that it ends in a way that you would not expect, which means that book 2 and 3 are very different from the first book. But I love this whole trilogy. I think the journey you're taken on from the first book all the way to the last is just mind-blowing. And if you love this one, then you can read also Mistborn Era 2, which Mistborn Era 2 is never going to be as good as the first one. But yeah, there's like 7 primer books set in this universe, so there's a lot of books and words to get stuck into if you're interested. Alright, I did mention Age of Madness, didn't I? On third spot, we have Age of Madness. This is truly one of the best trilogies I've ever read. And also, I'll say now, for the top 3, they're all number 1 in my opinion. I couldn't really rank these. This could easily have been number 1, so yeah, take that with a grain of salt. What I think is so phenomenal with the first universe, and especially Age of Madness, is the fact that Joe Abercrombie, he allows this world to progress. I truly don't understand why we don't see this happen more often. In the Age of Madness trilogy, we now are starting to see steampunk inventions to show up, and that is having huge ramifications for the whole world. Workers are starting to demand rights, and it almost feels like the start of a revolution similar to the French Revolution, so I really enjoy that. Another thing that is just incredible is that yes, some of the characters here we follow are the children of the characters in First Law, which almost never works. It is very rare it works because it just feels cheap, but in my opinion, a lot of the characters in Age of Madness are even better than the characters in the first trilogy, which is almost incredible to even think about. And then Wisdom of Crowds, the third book in this series, is peak fantasy. I was hooked to every single book in this trilogy, but yeah, A Little Hatred and Wisdom of Crowds, both those books they're perfect. 5 out of 5 stars, 6 out of 5 stars. Couldn't have asked for a better trilogy than The Age of Madness. And on second spot, which again could just as easily been number 1, is the Life Ship Trader trilogy by Robin Hobb. Yes, I love Fitz, but this is just absolutely astounding, phenomenal, incredible fantasy. What I love about this trilogy, and also just showcases how brilliant Robin Hobb is that the Farsi trilogy is a single POV, first-person character study, while this is an epic fantasy told in the third person with lots of POVs, and it is just incredible. Again, here Robin Hobb just showcases how good she is with characters, and especially like subtle things. It's just when you read the first book and then you get the third book, you notice how like emotional trauma has slowly changed over time, which is just phenomenally done. The world building just expands, and in my opinion, the world building is much more exciting in the Life Ship Trader trilogy. And this series has some of the most despicable characters you'll ever come across in fantasy. It has some of the most lovable characters you'll ever come across in fantasy, and a plot that is very riveting and intricate. And similarly to the Farsi trilogy, it will just evoke so many emotions in you. And I will argue that you can start with the Life Ship Trader trilogy. Yes, there are some tiny Easter eggs in this trilogy, but in my opinion, you can start with Farseer or Life Ship. It's just important that after you have read either Farseer or Life Ship, then follow the chronological order, in my opinion. But yeah, incredible series, and in my opinion, Ship of Magic is probably the best book Robin Hobb has ever written that I have read as of now. Now, if you watch my channel, then you know what's going to be on spot number 1, but as I said, it could have just as easily been on spot number 3. I love the top 3 series equally, so this is just on par with Life Ship Traders and Age of Madness, but that is going to be the Greenbone Saga by Fonda Lee. I mean, how often have I talked about the series on this channel? There's just something about this trilogy that I loved everything about it. It has very, very interesting clan wars. It perfectly illustrates the complexity of families and family dynamics. It has some of the best character arcs I've ever come across. And I love fresh fantasy. I keep mentioning it in this video. But this is an Asian-inspired fantasy set in an urban or a modern urban setting that follows different families and clan wars. And it has brilliant politics. Some of the best politics I've ever come across in the genre. And while the third book in this trilogy is often quite divisive, I think this is one of the best conclusions to a trilogy I have ever encountered. Yes, this kind of reads like 10 or 15 short stories, but this book spans over 10 years and it truly allows you as a reader to get an overview of how this massive conflict isn't just one single thing. It has so many different layers. Just the layers! I mean, there's so many moving parts, and somehow Fonda Lee is able to keep all of these layers separate and then slowly brings them together. Something I just feel is truly a masterpiece in Jade Legacy. But yeah, the Greenbone Saga is one of the best trilogies I have ever read. I'm not sure if I'm ever gonna read anything that is like this, because it just feels so different. And if you haven't read the Greenbone Saga yet, what are you doing with your life? You need to pick it up, because it is just absolutely brilliant. So those are the 15 best trilogies I've ever read, plus Lord of the Rings, which is on spot number 0. I love all of these trilogies. I mean, I wouldn't have read all 3 books if I didn't, so I don't really think you can go wrong with any of these. Now, if you're interested in knowing what my top 10 favorite series are of all time, then I would recommend checking out this video. Thank you so much for watching to the end of this video. Now, if you want to support what I do here, then I do have a Patreon. Now, a reason why I created a Patreon was to find a new way to reinvest to the channel, because basically since I created my Patreon, I spent around 100% of my earnings to hire an editor to do a couple of videos for me a month. Now, since creating my Patreon, an editor has done more than 20 videos for me on my channel, so it makes a huge difference. Now, if you join my Patreon, you will also get some benefits. For example, you'll get a name in my videos like these guys. You'll also be able to join the exclusive Viking book club, where every month we read one book together, and you might be the one to put the book forward. This month we're reading this book, and next month we're reading this book. You also get to vote on my next read, get access to exclusive videos, like a wrap-up, or even book reviews, and so much more. But this is totally voluntary, but all support is much appreciated.